Hello, I am Jack Anderson, a sophomore mechanical engineering student at Johns Hopkins University, and today I'm dissecting the Ford 8N tractor governor. The governor controls the engine speed during different engine loads like plowing or pulling equipment. It does this by acting as a communicator between the engine and the carburetor. The carburetor controls the air-fuel mixture that goes into the engine via a throttle valve, which affects the engine and the engine speed. This throttle valve is open and closed by the governor. The Ford 8N tractor was made in 1947. The 8N was made during the Great Depression and only cost around $585. So there's a helical gear on the governor, which receives power from the engine and is fixed onto this shaft right there. So also fixed on the shaft is this cross plate. So as the shaft rotates, so too does this plate. As the cross plate rotates, the ball bearings have net centrifugal force that's applied to them, causing them to move outward like that. So as they move outward, they induce a force on the bottom angled sheave that they sit in, which causes the sheave to move downward because of this action right here. This moves down. As the sheave moves downward, the bushing comes into contact with this fork here. To allow the sheave to continuously and easily spin while the bearing is in contact with the fork, this skinny ball bearing is put in between the sheave and the bearing like that. So as the fork is being moved downward, the outer lever, which is fixed to the fork shaft, rotates while the inner lever sits on the ball bearing. So as this fork is moved downward, this outer lever here will move with it. This inner one will not because it's put on a ball bearing. As the outer lever rotates, it acts on the carburetor throttle valve through this linkage right here. So what happens is, as this moves, it'll press open and close that valve. So at a high engine speed, you have very high centrifugal force acting on the balls, causing the outer lever to rotate and close this throttle valve, essentially making that engine speed go back down. So all of that happens without the driver having to do anything. Although a linkage is connected to the inner lever through a driver handle, and the driver can rotate this inner lever through that linkage and the handle. By rotating the inner lever counterclockwise, like so, the outer lever will move with the inner lever engaging the throttle valve, right? Because it's connected through the spring, and that'll make that hit the throttle valve. The throttle valve will cause a reaction force in the direction of this linkage to oppose that counterclockwise motion. And through doing this and having that reaction force go up through this linkage, it'll try to act on this spring here, and that spring will provide a counter moment about the outer lever, like so, you see, like that. So another thing that happens is that these governor balls get worn down over time. So the issue with that is that they don't radially move outward as expected, and to prevent that, lubrication is actually sent from the engine and sent through this opening right here. It's sent through here, and that's why there's an opening here, this hole within this shaft here, because the engine, it gets sent through there, and then it exits through this golden plated thing. So that basically lubricates all the balls, all these ball bearings, as well as this bearing here, which creates like a smooth frictionless thing and prevents that wornness that comes from these using these ball bearings. So the governor body is made out of die-casted aluminum, and I believe the helical gear and the inner and the outer levers are made from steel. The helical gear is most likely hobbed, since like that's an inexpensive way of making a helical gear. And in terms of safety, the levers were made out of steel to ensure that they didn't bend or deform during use, and that they don't need to be replaced. So let's say if a lever broke, if a lever broke, the throttle valve could be left in maybe like an unsafe position where it may be supplying the wrong mixture of air to fuel to the engine and potentially damaging the engine and the user.